Hello, thank you for tuning into Day 7's YouTube channel. My name is Tanatswa Tavaziva. I am Day 7's Data and Communication Director, and joining me today is our guest, Spiritual Director, Exploring Peace Ministries founder, and Bloom Yoga Studio co-owner, Whitney Simpson. Whitney, thank you for joining our reflection series.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm glad to be here today.
Of course. Let's get into it. What initially drew you to the field of spiritual direction?
It's actually a very long story that I'll give you the short version of. So, about 15 or so years ago, on my 31st birthday, I experienced a stroke and was paralyzed on my left side of my body, followed 2 days later by brain surgery and a long period of recovery, which actually led me into a season of anxiety, inability to be around large numbers of people while I was healing. And I missed my church desperately, but I had a really hard time being around lots of people.
Yeah.
And in that season, I had a friend who said to me, "Hey, I know you've been missing church. And my church is doing this group spiritual direction experience, and I'd love for you to come because I think it'd be a way for you to be in connection and community and receive some spiritual care and connection with others, but be in a small group, intimate experience." This was a year-long commitment that I made, and actually met my very first spiritual director, who's also a Day 7 provider, Casey Hitt, and had this wonderful journey of being entered into group spiritual direction that soon led me on my own discernment in realizing that I not only enjoyed participating in spiritual direction, but I felt nudged to offer it. And my kind of focus in particular is in that embodied way, mainly because of my stroke and my health crisis. So I not only am trained as a spiritual director, but also as a yoga teacher. And then I kind of combine those and offer an embodied way of listening for people.
That's amazing. That's amazing. What do you feel was one of the biggest takeaways or like the most impactful part when you started in spiritual direction?
Mm. The value of recognizing how every single person has a story, and every single one of us is really longing to have a listener in our lives.
Mm.
Um, and that for me was something I needed at a time when I was in my health crisis. Was I needed to have safe listeners, people who weren't trying to fix me or solve my problems or
Yeah.
interject their own experiences. They were truly safe soul listeners. And I also had counselors, and I had lots of physical therapy and all of those wonderful parts of my team. But spiritual direction was something that I didn't know I needed until I discovered it. And then once I discovered it, it became a huge part of my own healing journey. And now I realize and recognize how powerful it is for others. So I may not be in a spiritual direction session when I'm using my listening hat. I just left a private yoga session with a client who's 77 years old, and her husband died in January. And guess what I did? Probably 70% of the time I listened. And the rest of the time we moved our body and did a little bit of yoga. But I served her today as a listener as much as I did a yoga instructor.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like that saying about like how it builds you need a village to raise a child. Like that never goes away as you're talking about mind, body, and soul through that experience. That's great.
So true.
Um, I know that you wear a lot of different hats, not just a spiritual director, as you were saying, you kind of run the gambit when it comes to holistic care. What does this typical day look like for you?
It's fun because I'm an Enneagram 4, if that gives you
Yes.
any insight.
Yes.
And as an Enneagram 4, I definitely thrive on creativity and variety and not being told I have to do something in some certain fashion. So here's the positive thing about my work is I've found my niche in that way, that meets my personality and my Enneagram type, is that there's a lot of variety and a lot of space for creativity. Yesterday, I had an article due for the United Methodist Communications that's going to be published about embodiment and wholeness. And so I spent a good chunk of my day yesterday writing. But today, I've been in spiritual direction and yoga sessions one-on-one with clients. So the beauty, a little bit of what I love about my work is there's space for creating, like in the writing and recording the podcast prayers and meditations that I offer. But then there's also space to do some one-on-one work with private clients, offering direct soul care and teach yoga classes at my studio here in our community. So I love the variety and that most 2 days aren't exactly the same.
Yeah, I, I when I saw, like when I was getting to know you from the day 7 side, I was like, I can relate to this. I'm a 5-4 with a strong core, and I also have I'm like, everything is important, and it is, and it is. And
it is. And I had someone ask me not too long ago, like, if you had to pick spiritual direction or yoga or writing or retreats, like what would you, and I said, but I have picked, like, it's kind of picked me. And I think the element of incorporating these different pieces and discovering what it looks like to offer embodiment in these ways, for me, makes my work more holistic, more full, and not so well, it has to look like this.
Right. There's like room. There's room. Yeah, I love that. What is something that you wish people knew when starting spiritual direction?
Oh. Oftentimes, we enter into spiritual direction expecting that we are going to have answers. And many times, what happens is we have more questions. And so I think the thing that I would offer to someone who's curious about spiritual direction and getting to know themselves and their creator better is that we're not necessarily going to figure it out, right? We're going to have opportunities to keep learning, opportunities to peel back more layers, opportunities to go deeper. But if we come into something like spiritual direction expecting to figure it out and know the answers, that's a dangerous kind of slippery slope. And I also tell people, if they find a spiritual director who says they can help them figure it out, then they should be cautious, because the training that I've experienced and received tells me that that's not my role. My role is to hold space for people to ask the questions and for them to discern with God and oftentimes figure things out. No answers. Maybe they're discerning something specific. I have quite a few directees right now who may be discerning a call to ministry, or do they want to go into spiritual direction training to discern that? There may be times where we get answers to those immediate questions, but oftentimes our answers bring us more questions and not just this finalized place of a finish line. Like, oh yeah, I got there and now it's done. And there's not really, on the spiritual journey and path with God, it's not about a finish line. It's just about the journey itself.
Yeah. Are you telling me life isn't black and white?
Right? What a disappointment. Or what a freeing answer. I don't know.
Right. Depending on the day, right? Depending on the day.